Thanks again for joining us today. I want to introduce Jackson. Jackson Pinos are one of our new hires, although not our latest. I think we've got 4 after him, so he's now a seasoned pro over here. We're so lucky to have him. Jackson's going to cover some of our short-term daily and sort of weekly trends, and then maybe for the first 15 minutes or so, and then I'm going to jump in and do more of our long-term trends. And also, and I think we'll have time today, I want to jump into InfoSparks a little bit, just so you guys can understand. Jackson and I like to throw a lot of fish at you, but we also like to teach you all how to fish. So how you can kind of get at some of this yourself. So Jackson, you want to take it away, or?
Sure. I mean, do you want to pull up the slides, and that way you have control of the slides for the entire process?
Yep.
And then let's walk through the agenda and some of those fun little intro slides. And then when we get to short-term market trends, I'll take things over from there.
You got it. Good call. So yes, here we are. Oops, not a CE course, but some pretty images nonetheless. So, we like to say, you guys, we're drowning in information and yet we're starving for wisdom. So there's all this data. We're surrounded by data. We're in this era, this age of big data. And so are we here at the association, and we leverage that MLS data coming straight out of the North Star Matrix system, and we leverage it and we report on it for you guys, so you can know what's happening in your market, so you can grow your business, you guys can better serve your clients, your customers, Twin citizens, Minnesotans, consumers, however you guys want to think about them. We work with the media a lot, so everybody's on the same page when it comes to exactly what's happening in this market. It's sort of a ridiculous, frenzied pace. The odds of you getting the first home you write an offer on, even if you're 5 to 10% above asking price, sometimes there's challenges there. So it's important to get everyone on the same page, sort of manage expectations. And data has this tremendous ability to do that. So let's break down how the next hour, 57 minutes are going to go, maybe 50 minutes, and leave some time for Q&A. So we're going to talk about the market. Jackson's going to cover some of our short-term trends. I'm going to transition into some of our long-term trends. We'll segment the market a little bit. I think actually today we're going to do some of that segmentation work within InfoSparks. So we're going to try to weave in, sort of blend a little InfoSparks training or demo with some of that market analysis in terms of how we segment out the market. I think we're going to skip the economic update today, but we do want to take some questions. Overarching trends, you guys, we think of these as the macro trends, sort of high level, 30,000 foot view. Buyer activity is almost absurdly strong, right? 2020 was record-breaking year. I'll show you guys in some of the longer term trends. Already year to date, sales are at an all-time high, right? So for the first 4 months of the year, Jan, Feb, March, and April, so a third of the year, right? We're already ahead of the first 4 months of any year going all the way back to 2003. As most of you know, seller activity is still weak, unfortunately. This is probably one of the bigger challenges, as you all know, is just the supply question, right? We talk about it a lot. Jackson and I are analyzing all angles of the inventory crisis. We're working with Eric, our government affairs director, to see if there's any room for legislative action, any room for bonding bills, any regulatory changes and relief to help us build more product, to help us deliver more product to the market. So that's an ongoing thing. And then, of course, this one's related: inventory. It's by far the biggest factor that's kind of holding back the market and frustrating buyers, as we know. Active listings have come down 75% in 10 or 11 years, while sales and population have only increased. And with that, I'm going to toss it over to Jackson.
Sounds good. Thanks, David. So what I'm going to bring everybody through here is essentially some of the data that we have pulled from Showing Time and doing a little digging ourselves for the past week. This is information that, if you want to see it on a more regular basis, comes in the form of our Fast Stats blog, which we release every Monday. These are charts pulled right from there. So if you want this on a regular basis without David or me telling you explicitly how curves go up and down, then you can dig into that yourself. So the three metrics that are most important for us and things that you should be thinking about on a weekly basis are showing activity, new listings, which is a great indicator for seller activity, and pending sales, which is a great leading indicator for buyer activity, the demand side of that economic supply and demand equation there. What we're seeing here is a chart that gives you a weekly average of showing activity in the homes that we show in the 16 county metro area. And that is that orange line for the year to date and how that's been trending. As you can see, compared to the prior 2 years, both 2019's pre-COVID trends and that dip of 2020 in the spring of COVID, we are exceeding both years. We had a little bit of a dip on Easter weekend, that little V shape that you see in the orange, but so far, we have been, for the past 6 weeks, we've been trending for about 5,700 showings per week, which is pretty impressive. We've had a little bit of a dip in the past couple of days, but overall, we're trending above what we normally see, even when we take into account pre or post-COVID. And as we get back into the summer, we'll stop talking about the pre-COVID world and the post-COVID world, but you're probably going to hear it a little bit more as we talk about it in this presentation. Can we go through the next slide? So not just a surplus of showing or an outpacing of showing from 2019 to 2021 overall, but compared to last week and 2 years ago last week, we have these bar charts that are broken up by price range. Really important to not just think of any house as comparable to another, but breaking it up by one of those major factors that the seller and consumer often think about most is the price of their listing. As you can see, for most of these, the showing activity for particular price ranges is exceeding that of 2 years ago, mostly in homes listed $250,000 and above. And that is a considerable difference that we see, particularly in $300,000 to $400,000 price range, almost double, in fact. Really impressive to see that. The opposite is happening below $250,000, particularly for the past week. May of 2019, we had almost 10,000 showings at below $200,000 listings. Now, last week, when we pulled those numbers, it's almost half that amount. A major difference there. David and I were just talking before this presentation about what's causing that. Is it a difference in showings? A difference of inventory, or is it a difference in taste? And I think that there's room for interpretation for both of those. It might explain some of it, but I think that we're seeing a difference in the preference of people who are going to these showings moving towards that $250,000, $300,000 price range. Let's go ahead and take a step back from the numbers and start talking about shares. If we could go to the next slide, David. Now, when we talk about shares, just want to make sure we understand the important thing here. Let's say I made a pumpkin pie for David before this presentation. I, of course, got hungry at lunch, and I had a piece of that pie. The pie I have eaten is my share. The rest of that pie is also my share, but I might share some of it with David. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about shares, it's about the percentage that I have had in this pie, for instance. But when we're talking about homes and home share in the market, it's all about what percentage of a particular price range or a particular type of home has out of the whole pie that's available. Let's go ahead and get back into reality on the next slide. When we're talking about shares of overall showing activity, for each of these price ranges, they have taken a piece of that pie, right? And those percentages in the piece of the pie you see at the top of these bars right here. For 2021, looking at the orange bars, you can see that the biggest piece of the pie is going to price ranges at $250,000 to $300,000. They're at just about 22% of the total market have activity of showings in that price range. That's a major difference compared to what we had back in 2019. Look at that bar all the way off to the left. Prices, listings at or below $200,000 used to have the largest share of that market pie at almost 29%, showing that there has been a transition away from the lower priced listings into that more medium or mid-level price listings of 250 almost up to 450, maybe even $500,000. And remember, again, this is the MLS-wide 16-county Twin Cities metropolitan area. So things may differ in particular areas that you're looking at. We can show you the tools of how to dig into that later. Let's move on down and step away from showing. Oh, one more. We're going to talk about change in showing activity. This shows the percentage of how those have changed. Basically, take the difference of those two bars that we saw in some of the previous slides. What's the size of the difference between those bars? You can see exactly what we've already been talking about. The lower price levels have had negative differences. They've gone down in showing activity, whereas 250 and above, particularly in that $300,000 price range, they're really growing in showing activity, really growing in interest. Overall, it's about level with what we saw in 2019, which is promising. Let's move into new listings so we can talk about that ever popular classic supply-demand relationship. When David and I are talking about supply, seller activity, we use new listings as a great metric to understand that. That's pretty straightforward, right? You show that you're willing to sell by listing it. And this is a similar year-to-date tracker that we show again on a weekly basis. The darker the line, the more recent the year. So that very dark purple, that's 2021. The middle one, 2020, and as it gets lighter, earlier years. And you can see right now, if we're looking at the coming out of that dip of 2020, we're about there in 2021. We've survived and exceeded that dip this year. We did not have the rough spring that we had last year, but we're not quite there yet with the heights of 2019 or 2018 in terms of supply. So when you hear us talking about a sluggish seller activity, that's what we're looking at right there. We're saying that, hey, things aren't as bad as they used to be, but boy, we wish that they were a little bit more active like they were in years prior. Let's take a look at this same sort of breakdown by price in the same way we did showings. Oh, actually, we're going to talk about the pending sales. So this is the other end of that conversation, the demand side or the buyer activity. And overall, this shows a very different story. David said buyer activity is strong. He did not lie to you. This is, a definite high watermark for us in recent weeks. As you can see with the same sort of color coding, the darker the line, the more recent the report. And we are certainly exceeding 2020 levels with that dip that they had back in spring of 2020, but we're also exceeding 2019 and 2018 levels as well. Particularly for the past couple weeks, we are on a high. We're starting to level out and be similar with where we were at the very end of that dark green line. But it shows that there is definitely an imbalance between buyer activity and seller activity. And we can dig into that a little bit more at the different price breakdowns in the next slide. So not surprising based off of the difference between that purple line that we have for 2021 and the lighter purple line of 2019. We're down across the board roughly. Overall, a 30% decrease in new listings, but that does not impact all price ranges the same. Particularly for price ranges that are below 250,000, they seem to be impacted more greatly than those in the higher amounts. Now, obviously, we do have growth in the $1 million plus range, and that is impressive. Particularly because it's a really small sample size. If you're selling, for every one home that you're selling at million plus in the Twin Cities, you might be selling, hundreds in and around below $250,000. So keep that in mind when you're looking at those graphs with a little pinch of salt of why are these numbers like this. But particularly the hardest hits from reports from last week are the $150,000 to $190,000 price range with a 69% drop. That is definitely squeezing that lower price range market a little bit more. And maybe that is part of what's encouraging people to consider and go to showings of price ranges that might be just a little bit higher because there's more availability. Let's go ahead and look at this from the demand side of the equation on the next slide. And you can see we're pretty similar overall with where we were at in 2019. Now, obviously, the lower price listings have a little bit less demand than what we saw in 2019, and the higher price listings are seeing a little bit more. Particularly two bars that I want to raise here. Let's start with the elephant in the room, that 200% growth in luxury homes. Keep in mind here, luxury homes are a very small share of the market, a really small slice of that pie. Yes, they're worth a lot of money, but when you have 12 homes that are sold in 2019, and it doubles to 36 homes that are sold in 2021, that is a 200% increase. But that increase is from 1% to, or just under 1% to just around 3%. Certainly something to keep in mind because it is the fastest growing price range, but that piece of the pie is really small. So keep that in mind when you're looking at these sorts of numbers. But overall, homes above $500,000 are growing, and their demand is been steady from week to week. When we're looking at these charts, they are regularly above the numbers that we've seen in terms of demand for 2019, whereas the lower price homes are seeing less demand. I think that is what I have for short-term trends. Again, that was just looking at things at the time frame of last week compared to 2 years ago last week. David's going to talk more about longer-term trends from a monthly level. That will give you a wider scope. So think about you're taking a step back from that micro level of comparing weeks to comparing months now.
Yeah, perfect. Jackson, thank you. An excellent job as always. Yeah, so just shifting into some longer term trends, you guys are going to notice there's some overlap because the market is undersupplied and demand is strong. So there's going to be some themes, some glue that sort of continues throughout. All right, well, let's keep trucking here. So again, and just a word on this, I think Jackson did a good job kind of covering it, but I just want to say, I think we need another month, maybe two, before we get back to year over year. We realize that 2-year comparisons are not as ideal, but just because of what things looked like last April, it's just not fair to compare. And we'll hop into some of our market reports where it looks like new listings have surged, right? And sales have surged. Sales have kind of surged. New listings are up only because of the low baseline last year. So sort of some wonky things happening. We'll try to walk you guys through that. Okay, so new listings, change in seller activity by price point. As Jackson pointed out in some of our weekly trends, we see the same thing in our monthly trends, which hopefully that is the way things work. So under 250, declines in seller activity, so fewer new listings flowing onto the market, fewer actives then. And then you start to see some gains, especially as you get up into, I always struggle with this. Is it entry-level luxury? Is it bronze luxury? But maybe some of these early luxury markets, you do see increases. As you get into the real luxury over $1 million, just 6% over 2 years, about 3% per year. But we do see some much more significant growth in 5 to 750, and then $750,000 up to $1 million. Overall, guys, still down, even over 2 years, still down, right? 2.33%. So we really wish we had better news to report there. Change in pending, so signed contracts, accepted offers, right? Executed purchase agreements. Here again, folks, you can't make this stuff up. We see declines under 250 because there just isn't the supply there to write offers on. Plus, as Jackson and I were mentioning, you see this shift. You see this shift into maybe bigger product, maybe product with more bedrooms, maybe product with that's a little bit newer because maybe there's a little bit less competition for some of the newer product a little bit further out. But I think what's important here is, let me just hop back one, right? We see the gains kind of as you get into luxury. That's not crazy, you guys, because that's where the demand is growing the fastest as well, right? Really, well, out of all these ranges, really $500,000 to $1 million, right? Even $500,000 on up, you could say, are experiencing 70, 80, 100% gains over 2 years. So that's pretty dramatic. Even though overall it's about 8.5% or about 4%, a little over 4% per year. We like to plot these together. We like to co-plot these just to show, just so we don't have to go back and forth. We can show you guys the change in new listings, right? Change in seller activity and the change in pendings or signed contracts or buyer activity. So basically, this is where we can see both seller and buyer activity on the decline here, decreasing over our 2-year period. But what's interesting, I think, is as soon as you get over $250,000, as soon as you cross that threshold, you see growth in demand in green far outpacing growth in new supply in maroon. In other words, green is higher than red here, and here, and here, and here, and here, meaning buyer activity is increasing much more quickly than seller activity. Okay, getting into some of my favorites. I don't know if I'd call myself a historian, but I like looking at historical data. I like benchmarking kind of where we are today against where we've been in the past. And the reason we like to go all the way back to 2003 is because it encapsulates a few different market cycles, right? We can see the run-up in supply into the bubble. We can see what happened after the mortgage crisis and the Great Recession. We can also see a little bit of a spike around our tax credit period in 2010. So it's just nice to see kind of what's happened. Well, it would be nicer if it were better news and if we had more product to sell. But it's nice to see the pattern and the trend and just sort of the history. More lately, right? I'll leave the history alone. Lately, look at what happened in April of last year, right? No kidding. We know the whole world changed. So we saw that down 20% and now up about 22%. Here's what's important though, right? Don't read too much into the up 22% because like we said, it's off of a very low baseline. It's a suppressed baseline. What's a little bit, I don't know if I'd say worrisome, but what's a little bit unfortunate is that we're still not above 2019 levels, even though demand is way, above 2019 levels. So this is causing some concern. I suppose if we had to squeeze a positive out of this, 74.70, I suppose at least it's higher than some years that we've had in the last 10 years or so. All right, so April pendings, again, up 34%, kind of an absurd, it looks extreme. The percent change looks extreme because it is, because of what we saw, because of the pullback last April when the COVID effect really was felt. Here, we're actually above 2019. We're above 2018, right? We're above 2017 levels. And you guys can see, looks like we're what? The third strongest April in the last 18 years, right? 66, 63, 65, 62. So, I think that's a pretty strong indication that demand is strong and that buyers are really ready to make purchases if they've got the supply available. Closing. So these are of those purchase agreements that actually hit the closing table. By the way, the vast majority do, but there's always a couple percent that don't for whatever reason. A contingency is triggered, right? Buyer gets cold feet and backs out on inspection. If they do inspection, which a lot are bypassing now, so never mind that. So closed sales, you guys, up 9%. Remember, there was still pendings in the pipeline that were going to the closing table. So we didn't see quite that decline that we saw with pendings, which is a leading indicator that we see with closings, which of course is a lagging indicator. So up 9%, about 5,100. You guys can kind of see how that compares. Sure enough, interestingly enough, that's also the fourth strongest showing. I shouldn't say showing, this is not showing data. That's the fourth strongest mark level figure is going all the way back to 03. So encouraging, although again, we need the supply to sell to these people. Market times, with demand so strong and supply so weak, raise your hand if you think listings are going to linger on the market. No, none of you? Well, I can't see any of your hands. Right, homes are selling more quickly, right? 53% faster. 8 days. 8 days, right? A week and a day in April. Because we use our median, by the way, be careful here. Some of our reports, our monthly indicators actually does use average. Of course, that average is skewed up by listings that take a long time to sell, especially luxury. 8 days, week and a day, a far cry from 140 days on market. I'll just say it, this is pretty crazy. We thought this was low, 18 to 20 days. We thought this was a really fast pace. Right, 8 days, quite a record as you guys can see, and really quite an astonishing fact. Median sales price, let's make sense of the dollars as we say. Most recently, prices up about 10.5%, exactly 10.5% to 337. So that's where half of our deals sell for over 337. The other half of listings sell for under that 337 mark. You guys can see where we are versus where we've been. Here again, I like to show kind of the run up to the bubble, the downturn, and then the subsequent recovery. I want to also point out 10.5%. Well, we beat that. So, that is the strongest year over year growth since 2013. So that is somewhat of a high watermark. As long as we're talking about year over year price change, let's really dig in and kind of geek out on this, you guys. Year over year change in median sales price. Let me do a quick time check. 2:30. Okay, I think we're in good shape. So year over year change in median sales price. Even in the bubble, you guys, 04, 05, prices were only rising 9, right? Not even really 10%. Then we had our crash. Then we had a little bit of our tax credit period. And then we had this major kind of phase 1 of recovery, right? We saw really strong price growth. Again, off of our lows, off of these lows, right? So once they came down, as you guys can see, we started to have pretty dramatic price growth, as we can see. Lately, we've also had pretty dramatic price growth, right? Roughly 10% for what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months. We're going on. I'd feel pretty confident saying we'll have 12 months of of roughly 10% year over year price gains. You guys can see we've sort of been there before for maybe a few months. It's pretty plain to see we've got a sustained period of above average price growth. What's causing that? I don't even have to say it, right? Demand is far outpacing supply. All right, I know some of you have heard this. I don't know if it's a joke or just a funny thing, which is a joke. I'll just say it. So what's the difference between median and average? Jeff Bezos walks into a bar and on average, everybody just became a billionaire, right? Or Bill Gates walks into a bar and on average, everybody just became a billionaire. Let's do the math, you guys. Here's our 6 people belly up to the bar. Can you go belly up to the bar anymore? I don't know. Maybe they're sitting on a patio with a wine or whatever your preference. In walks Jeff with 200 million, right? What does he do to the income for this group? He forces it to 28.5 million. What's the median income for this group? 65 grand. Why? Half are making more, half are making less. This is why we prefer the median. Let's be a little bit ridiculous and actually, this is probably more accurate. Now this is $200 billion. What happened to the average? Instead of 28.5 million, now it's 28.5 billion. What happened to our median? Didn't move a penny, didn't have to. Still have half of the incomes below our median and half of our incomes above our median. So the average went up by a huge factor, right? While the median was static, it was stable, right? Because it's insulated from this outlying activity. This is an outlier. It's an anomaly. It skewed our average. It did not fool our median. The median will not be fooled. Again, just keep punching this dead horse just a little bit more, guys. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 home sales, right? Maybe some normal prices. Maybe this is a little bit on the affordable end for today's market. But just take a look, guys. The average sales price of this group is 830,000. The median, 312.5. Why? We have to split the difference. If we have an even number, we have to split the difference between the two in the middle, right? You tell me what's a better description of these 6 sales? 830,000, where we only had one above the average, or 312.5, where we had half below that median and the other half sold for above that median. Anyway, I like to break that down. We still get questions on that fairly regularly, so we like to just kind of break it out that way. Guys, because we know that larger homes are selling, right? We know that. We can see it in the data. We just know it intuitively because people are buying larger homes, because demand, if you can't find a home in Richfield or St. Louis Park or Eden Prairie or Bloomington, you're going to start looking in the Lakevilles and the Rosemounts and the Farmingtons. I think I saw Leanne on here. The Farmingtons, maybe the Blaines or, Maple Grove, whatever. So we know that bigger houses are selling. How do we get out of that? How do we fix that? Simple. We look at price per square foot. I don't care if you have 800 square feet selling or 8,000 square feet selling. PPSF is such a glorious indicator because it normalizes the data for size. In other words, sellers are accepting, buyers are offering, and sellers were accepting $175 per foot of house. We don't care how many feet you have. That on the median, that's that midpoint where half of the sales sold for more per foot, the other half of the sales sold for less per foot. Now, we know there are still downtown condos in the Mill District selling for $400 a foot, right? Don't believe me? There's 1,000 square foot condo selling for $450,000, right? That's $450 per foot. I think the average around there is a little more like $350, but we know that's happening. We also know there are homes that are selling for $80 a foot. It's pretty rare now, but we know that it's happening. So just know this is kind of that midpoint. In fact, as a median, it's exactly that midpoint. Okay, another one of my personal favorites, April percentage of original list price received at the time of sale. How are sellers faring? Not so great? No, they're doing tremendously well, right? Not only are they getting 100% of their original list price, they're getting 3.3% on top of 100%, right? 103.3%, and this is original. not after a price reduction, right? This is original. So here again, we can kind of follow our cycle, kind of our market cycle here, where things were strong, and then we kind of weakened here and have recovered. Looks like we were flatlining a little bit between, in 2018, 19, and 20. And then, wow, do we see a jump? We've been seeing this for some time. This absolutely speaks to multiple offer situations. This absolutely confirms, that supply is really weak and demand is really strong. This speaks to buyers outbidding one another, right? We have a lot of competition out there. Sellers are not accepting lowball offers. In fact, they may not even accept 105% offers, right? We still hear that $300,000 listings are selling for $330,000, right? That's 10% over. I just heard a couple of weeks ago, $400,000 home. I thought I heard someone offered $440,000 and they said they weren't even in the top half of offers. At that price point, that's a little bit surprising to me, to be honest. I think under 4, especially under 3, but even 3, 3.25, 3.5, it seems like that's where the most competition is. So as you get over 4, especially over 5, I'm surprised to be hearing 5 or 10% over, but we know it's still a thing that's happening. So really a strong indicator there. Inventory, nothing to talk about here because we've got plenty of it. I kid. There was a time, boys and girls, where we had 34,300 properties listed under active status in the North Star system. 34,000. How did we end last month? As of April 30th, we had 5,650 listings that were still under active status. That's 45% fewer than April of last year. And an absurdly low number, right? We always like to pause here, you guys. I know, let me see. I know some of you have heard this before. I insist on doing it every time just because it's such an important factor. So what's our methodology here? The way we calculate inventory is a snapshot. It's a snapshot of the properties in active status. Let me back up. I hate when I say that. A snapshot of the properties under active status. Sometimes we say inactive status, and that can be confusing. A snapshot of the properties under active status as of month end, April 30th. Guess what? In a market with a median of 8 days on the market, listings that come on the market April 10th that go off April 18th, right? Because it's 8 days on market, those guys will never make it into inventory, will they? Because they weren't active on the last day of the month. Never has that happened more, right? Than in a market with such a fast pace, in a market with 8 days on market where listings spend 8 days. So just know this is that snapshot at month end. This is how it looks at month end. Now, all these data points are the same, so it's consistent. However, listings here, and here that came online, say at the beginning of April, there was a pretty decent likelihood they'd still be active at the end of April. Now, right, listings that came on April 10th, there's a pretty good chance over half of them will be gone by April 20th or 25th, right? Whatever. So we know that's a factor. Just be aware of that, you guys. This is the snapshot at the end of the month. This is not the total number of options that a buyer would have had during the month. Just so you all know, that's important. Months of supply, that is a vibrant blue. Nice and vibrant. Month supply of inventory, you guys. Another one of our favorite indicators, only because it's able to show us the ratio, the relationship between supply and demand. So it's not just pendings or closings, right? It's not just new listings or actives. This is actually, how much would how long would our supply of homes last at the current demand pace, at the current sales pace? Sure enough, about 1 month of supply, right? There are some markets with 1 week of supply. I'll say that again. There are some markets in the Twin Cities that have 0.25 months of supply, right? 1 week of supply. Most of you know we're shooting for 5 to 6 months, 4 to 6 months. You know what? Even 4 to 7 months is a relatively balanced market. You guys can see we've been oversupplied before. This is our oversupply era. And then we've been pretty drastically undersupplied lately. especially now. So the pendulum never really stays in the middle, does it? We wish the pendulum could stay at 5 months of supply, right? 5 to 6, 4 to 6. It's not what happens, right? It's like an oil tanker. We start turning it little bit ways down the St. Lawrence Channel or down the Straits of Hormuz. Then we start turning. So look, we started to do, we were talking about the tax credit, right? And all this excess supply was soaked up. It was absorbed. Another word for month supply is an absorption rate. So you guys can see the pendulum blew right past center, right? We went from 8 to 5. We did not pause at 5. We went down to 3, down to 2, and now down to 1 month of supply. We're undersupplied, you guys. I don't know. There's only so many words in the thesaurus to keep saying that different ways. We're drastically undersupplied. I like to break this down a little bit as well. Another time check, 42. Okay, we're doing okay. I like to break this down just in terms of how we think about sellers markets. Sellers markets, 1 unit of supply, but there's a lot of demand. Guess what? These folks have to compete with one another in order to secure this home. This gal may have written 5 offers. She's excited about this one. This guy, he's got cash, right? Maybe that seller will like that. This person, maybe FHA, who knows? This person, maybe they bypass inspection. This person has an appraisal gap clause in their contract, whatever. These sellers can basically be picky with their offers. Now let's contrast that with a buyer's market and all the hallmarks of that buyer's market. And you'll see, the trends that we see within sellers markets here as well. Buyer's markets. So now we've got a little bit more supply relative to demand. In other words, these sellers are actually going to have to compete with one another in order to lure in one of these buyers. Here, it's just the opposite. Buyers are competing with one another over the home. Here, the homeowners are competing with one another for the buyers. Here's where you see price reductions, right? The buyer can negotiate a little bit, laundry list of inspection items to fix, right? So that's what you see there. We're shooting for a balanced market. That's a healthy market. An economist would call that market equilibrium, right? We're not leaning one way or the other. We're kind of balanced. We're not there. We wish we were. That's a healthy market that's not favoring buyers or sellers. And you've got 4 units of supply that are pretty well matched up with 4 units of demand. That's what we're shooting for. All right, let's take a look at year to date, you guys. When we had, Jan and Feb or, even first quarter data, it's a little bit, it's a small data set. It's a relatively small data set. It's also mostly a winter, cold part of the year. As we get into April, we're starting to get into spring. We actually had a pretty nice April. So it makes sense to do a check on some year-to-date figures. And maybe we'll do this every other month or so. April year-to-date new listings down 1.25% to 23,000. At least we're not 22.7. It's the second lowest year-to-date figure for new listings, second lowest since 2003. Wish we had better news to report to you guys. So still, obviously, a little bit frustrating here in terms of new supply coming on. In good news, on the demand side, of course, we see closed sales at 16,114. Sure enough, everyone, that is an all-time record for April year-to-date closings for any year going back to 2003. I'm 99% confident saying going back to 2000, but we can't say that with certainty because our data is only valid as of 2003. North Star had a cutover, and we can't do pre and post 2003 comparisons because the data just wasn't archived before that. So 16,100, again, I shouldn't say all-time high, but at least an 18-year high. I'm pretty confident calling it a 21-year high. So a more than 2-decade high watermark. Pretty impressive. You know what? Let's shift gears a little bit. I want to shift gears a little bit. I promised you guys we'd do a little bit of InfoSparks analysis here. So if you'll bear with me, I'll make things a little bit brighter. If you'll bear with me, I just want to walk you all through some other trends that we're seeing. A few minutes with Mosey. Don't forget to watch Mosey. We love John here. So let me hop into InfoSparks and Yeah, let's talk. So by default, right, we're looking at the Twin Cities region, we're looking at median sales price, and we're only looking at our 3-year history. Let me expand this out a little bit. Okay, so now we see kind of our run up, the downturn, and our subsequent recovery. We can go through all of the metrics that we just looked at, you guys, right? We can look at new listings, still pretty leak. I'll have leek soup. Still pretty weak, not leak, potato leak. Pretty flat. You guys can see the COVID impact there. Look at March into April. Saw a little bit of recovery, but we're still down a little bit on a 12-month basis. Pendings, you guys, look at what happened. Look at March, right? April into May, we saw that COVID dip, but looks like by July and August, right, we were kind of back on track. And look at the hockey stick that we've seen. Absolute exponential growth since we had that pullback, right? So some folks, here and here, some folks were thinking, oh gosh, are we gonna go down here? And I think a lot of folks were surprised that, at just what happened, that there was this major shuffle, that demand absolutely surged. And we can really see that in the data. Days on market, right? That's over the last 12 months. So check this out. Let me switch from 12 months to monthly. This is where we see our monthly data. So take a look. Homes are selling more quickly in spring and summer market, May and June, taking a little bit more time to sell in winter market in Jan and Feb, selling a little bit more quickly, taking a little bit longer. And there you go, folks. There's our 8 days, right? There's our 8 days on market. Just in case you didn't believe our charts. You should believe our charts. They're real. So let's start to break some of this out, you guys. What should we do? Let's take a look at new listings and let's break things down by property type. So we're looking at single family in blue, condos in red, and then townhomes in green. And I'm going to maximize this. Okay, so we can see the trend, right? We can definitely see the seasonality in our data. Here's May, right, versus December. So we can see this sort of cycle with the seasons. If I don't care about that, I'm going to use our rolling 12-month view, right? And now we can kind of see a little bit better, what's happened. I think the trend becomes even more clear as we switch to bar charts, right? Single family new listings actually down 3.25%. You can see that's the vast majority of our market, right, at about 57,000 units over the last 12 months, right? Over the last 12 months, condo new listings are actually up 24%. Townhome seller activity only up about 0.5% over the last year. Let's look at just April. Interesting. Single family listings up 19%. Condo new listings almost doubled, right? So from 310 to 620 would be doubling. So we're up 99.5%. Townhome new listings, 17%. How about on the demand side, you guys? Let's shift over to pendings. Interesting. Single family, 4,700, that's a 28.5% jump in signed contracts. But remember, we saw that decline caused by COVID, right? We saw that COVID decline. However, here again, note please that we are above April of 2019 levels. So we did see that gain over 2 years, right? Even though we had a dip and then an increase. How about condos? Wow, 121% jump in signed condo contracts. I thought people were leaving the city, right? Apparently not, right? Apparently condo activity more than doubled, condo demand more than doubled metro-wide. We also saw our second biggest gain in townhome. So I don't know if we call that multifamily. I know some are detached, but a lot of these share a common wall, up 37%. However, look at this, guys, 1014 versus 1067, right? Not above 2019 levels. Single family, above 2019 levels. So always kind of interesting to think about that. How about market times? Wow, here we can see condos taking a little bit longer to sell, right? Just for the month of April. So 21% increase in market times from 24 to 29. So, you're talking an extra 5 days, 4 days, I guess, compared to 2019. Look at single family. Lordy, are these units selling quickly, right? 22 down to 16, down to 8, down to 6, right? Down to 6. So 6 days on market for single family. We can see it's actually condos and townhomes that bring the whole market up to 8 days, right? Townhome market times down 31.3% to 11 days. One of our favorites, let's click on month supply, also known as an absorption rate. Time check, 251. Okay. So single family absorption rates, you guys, less than 1 month of supply, right? 0.9 months of supply. Remember, 0.85 and 0.86 will round to 0.9. And that's down from a little over 2 months of supply. So a nearly 60% decrease in single family absorption rates. Clearly, this is where the focus is. Although, again, we do see a little bit of a shift back to condos. We see condo activity increasing the most of any property type. Even though it's a small segment, it did increase the most. Also, 1 month of supply for townhomes, 2.5 months of supply for condos, still a seller's market, right? But less of a seller's market than it was last April and in April of 2019. Okay, sales prices. I think we're going to see condo prices rising just a little bit. Okay, so 6.5%. Single family prices up nearly 14%. That's where supply is so low and demand is so strong. No surprise, prices are going to be rising pretty quickly. Let's skip over to townhomes. I forgot to mention the level, you guys. 370 for single fam versus about 263 and a quarter for townhome, up 10.5%. And then just about 197, 198 for condos, but only up about 6.5%. So less upward price pressure on condos. The most upward price pressure on single family, of course. It's got the tightest absorption rate, so that's what we would expect. Before I click on percentage of original list price, I want you guys to think. I want you guys to think about what you'd expect, right? What's the hottest property segment, right? We already kind of saw it, single family. I would expect, don't let me lead the witnesses, Your Honor. I would expect that single family sellers are getting the strongest offers. I would expect that townhome sellers are getting the second strongest offers. And I would expect condo sellers to be yielding or realizing the smallest share of their original list price. Let's take a look. God, it's nice to be right every now and then, right? 103.1% for single family, right? 103.1 townhome, 102.6. And just like we suspected, condos 99.5, but up a little bit, right? Up 0.2. So perhaps some signs of recovery and some signs of change in that segment. Let's see. Let's do one or two more, you guys. Let's do just a couple other breakouts so we can take a look. How about new construction? Right, new construction. Still getting 100%. Existing homes, previously owned properties. These guys are getting 103 and a quarter. Pretty interesting. Sales prices. Let's look at the prices of new and existing. New home prices up 12.5% to $445,000, right? I remember when we were complaining about almost 400,000, right, over the last couple of years. Well, here we are at about 450. Oh, lumber. Lumber is partly responsible for this, not entirely, but lumber is partly responsible for this. I like to cite the 5 L's: lots, labor, lending, lumber, and laws. One more time: lots, labor, lending, lumber, and laws, right? That's what's driving new construction. Existing home prices, about 3.25, up 11.5%. New construction, almost 450, up 12.5%. How about market times? There's your 7 days on market for existing, right? Looks like there's the fiercest competition there. But for folks that can't find that product or can't, their budget, that's not within their budget, well, depending on where, if existing's down in your budget, as we just saw, right, there's a decent chance new construction's not in your budget. But, we've seen such an increase, especially with closer in markets, right? Your St. Louis Parks, your Richfields, some of those guys. So you do see 32 days on market for new construction. So just about a month versus a week for existing previously owned product. Definitely sheetrock prices are going up. I heard there's a shortage of PVC. Virgin vinyl that hasn't been used before, out of the plastic polymers, not out of the recycled plastic. Wow, are we digressing? Lumber's $1,000 for 1,000 board feet. That's $1 a foot, right? I remember at Home Cheapo, maybe a year or two ago, a sheet of OSB was what, $8, $10? A sheet of OSB is now $55. I think I saw lately. 400%, 500% increases. It's pretty insane. All right, what else, guys? Let's do percentage of original. We already saw that 100, 103. We saw market times, absorption rates, 2 months of supply versus, roughly one, a little less than 1 month of supply there. So we can see some important differences there as well. Really, really quickly, and then I want to see if we have a question or two. Let's just look at size, you guys, because we keep hearing, right, bigger product, bigger, bigger, bigger. Let's look at pending. So let's look at demand. Of course, things look a little funny because of our COVID dip and recovery, but let's see what we can see here, you guys. Okay, so at first I looked over at 42% roughly, and I thought that was our biggest gainer, right? 2,500 square foot properties or bigger. And then I looked over here, 43%. Sure enough, we actually had the strongest demand growth in this 1,500 square foot and smaller segment. This big stuff has given everything else a run for the money, right? 1670 versus 1740, 1630. So pretty interesting, just interesting dynamics when you think about it. One more, you guys, instead of by size, let's just do by bedroom count, right? Let's see what's happening here. Okay, so technically our largest gainer was actually for one bed. Guys, those are condos, right? Believe it or not, right? We do see that coming back. 2 beds up 38%, 3-bed demand up 31%, and then 4-bed signed contract activity up 32%. In terms of new listings, what product is coming on? Yeah, it's more of the smaller stuff. But we do see 30, 20, 18% gains as we get into some of the larger product as well. Just real quickly, wow, right? Look at how much tightening we've seen in that 4-bed plus segment. Look at how much tightening, you guys, from 2.5 months of supply down 60% to 1 month of supply, right? So it's pretty much tied with 3-bed homes, but instead of 1.8 to 1 month, this did 2.4 to 1 month. Again, some important changes here. Guys, we could spend hours on this, and sometimes we do. I want you all to know, once you have what you're looking for, right? No matter what your area, no matter what your metric, and no matter what breakout or variable you happen to choose, right? We have a saying, secret agents don't do a lot of business. So don't keep this stuff to yourself, right? Share it with the world, right? Share your gold with the townspeople. So I know I went a little fast. Just know, guys, click on share. I like to choose live. I think you all are going to see why. I'll click share. I can either copy this link and have it and send it or put it on social. Let's take a look in a new window. So there you go, folks. Because we chose live, right? Because we chose live, we can customize our chart a little bit, right? Maybe we want to hone in on a couple segments. We can do that, right? We can do that. Notice also this is branded to me. Why? Because I'm logged in, right? And even a step further back in Matrix, because I'm logged in. You will be logged in, which means it'll be you in InfoSparks, which means it'll be you on your shared charts, on your exports, right? So just know there's a lot of different options. It plays nice with Facebook, with the Twitterverse, and a whole lot of different options, a lot of different platforms. With that, you guys, let's turn to chat. And I don't see anything. I don't see anything else, but I know we're at time. So if anyone needs to jump off, we understand. But we'll hang out for another minute or two if anyone has questions. No, not so much.
We must have wowed him, David.
We just wowed him.
I'm going to jump on really quick and say that when you guys leave, you should be directed to a survey. If you guys could take a minute just to fill that out, that would be greatly appreciated. Again, if there are any questions, we'll stick around for just another minute or two.
Awesome. Thanks, Ashley. Oh, there's my reminders. So, yeah, I mean, supply is low, demand is strong, prices are rising, homes are selling quickly. To be frank with you guys, it sometimes does feel a little bit like a broken record. We see some important changes month to month. as Jackson pointed out, even week to week, and that's important to convey to yourself, to your agents, to your broker, to your clients. So there are obviously some important differences, but the trend of weak supply and strong demand and rising prices is continuing. Any other final thoughts? I guess I'll just do one real quick, just while we're here. I'll do a real quick comparison. I know we didn't get to do areas, so maybe I'll just throw in a Richfield, and then I'll throw in, just for fun, let's throw in a Bloomington. Month supply, Richfield, there's 0.7, right? So we can see some important differences. How about if we just say single family? Richfield, half a month of supply, 2 weeks roughly of supply for single family in Richfield, right? Definitely a tight market. How about percentage of original? 106.3, right? That is a very strong figure. Speaks to the competition for single family homes closer in, right? In Richfield, bordering Minneapolis. What should we throw in?
Oh, David, we do have a message from Kate here, saying that there's a seller asking for expectations, selling a single family home in August.
Oh boy, let me reach for the crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh wait, that's in the repair shop. Like we were saying, I would expect mostly a trend continuation. I wouldn't expect anything major. We talk about interest rates both in our weekly blog and occasionally here as well. Just doing a check. I think Jackson, I saw we were right around 3% the other day. Yep. Sure enough, perfect. So just kind of zooming in and, seeing some of the movement in rates, up a little bit with inflation concerns, down a little bit. So here's the thing. If they're selling, there's a 90% chance they also have to be a buyer, unless they're doing, maybe they're seniors doing, moving
consolidating down to one home,
consolidating
selling
down,
off the second home. Yeah.
Snowbirds, whatever you do, Arizona, Florida, a senior living type environment, whatever. I would expect in August, I would expect prices to still be rising. I would expect demand to be strong and supply to still be weak. That said, I guess I'd expect it to be maybe a little bit looser, maybe a little bit less of a tight market, because that's a little bit past sort of the height, right? The height of things. Let's do our monthly. That's a little bit past, it's getting a little bit past kind of our peak, right? So, as you see into kind of June, July, maybe some of that cools down. Usually, right, June is kind of our peak, and then we kind of slow down into July and August. Usually June's our peak, and then we kind of slow down a little bit. Last year was different for so many reasons, so we didn't really see a slowdown in fall much at all. Yeah. But yeah, I would expect a similar market.
And Kate, to address your question of what David's saying is, we can't predict what's going to happen in August, but we can give you trends as to what's happened up to this most recent completed month. And InfoSparks is a great start to that. If you're looking for specific metrics, like anything down at the bottom of the page, it's just a couple clicks and you can get down to your seller's city. And depending on what city your seller is in, maybe even their community area or even their neighborhood, and can get more accurate detail to be more specific to that seller. Yeah,
good point. One thing I will say, I guess I would expect this metric in particular maybe to cool down just a hair. Let me go to average here. Just kind of look at the chart. It's a little crazy. I would expect
exceeding 100% is exceptional.
It's pretty exceptional. Yep. Frankly, this August, I would suspect we're still over 100%. I would think we'll be closer to 100.5 or 101. Yeah. You guys, by the way, we've gotten over 100%, in 18. Mm-hmm. I guess we didn't technically do it in 19, but we obviously did in 20. And here we are in 2021, well above 100%. So I would expect this to be closer to 101, maybe 102, 101 come August. But like Jackson said, we will have to wait and see. It's still a fast-paced market.
And hey, April's information is good enough to be able to tell you what happened in the most recent weeks.
Yeah.
So that's pretty useful information. It's not like you have to compare what happened in 2019 and just hope for the best.
Hope is not a strategy. Hard market data is a strategy, and conveying it intelligently to your clients as they make the largest financial transaction of their lifetime, that's a strategy. That's a plan.
All right, I think we're good, David.
Welcome. Yeah, if you guys are feeling good, we're feeling good, and please do tune in next month. And let me just do a total pitch for what Jackson and I do on a weekly basis in this market data section. Do check out the stats deck. You guys will see this in our weekly newsletter, but just know it's right here on the website. So I'll just show you guys some of the stuff that Jackson was pulling from at the beginning. It's all right here for you, right? It's all right here. Every single week we update it, right? We make it awesome every week. It's right here. You can talk to your sellers about why showing activity might be down in their price range, right? Hard data that you guys can use. So please do use it. Just know that that's there for you. And with that, thank you all again so much for joining us, and we will see you next time.